Hey, I'm Sven Masterson, one of the co-founders and mentors in the Mentoring Men community. And in this video, I want to respond to a question that was asked recently in our community. The man who asked this question had said, hey, I'm finding myself in the middle of an emotional storm of my own. But it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with my partner. And I'm just wondering, what are 5 things I can do in the middle of such an emotional storm to kind of find my way through it? And so I sat with this for a few minutes and thought, what are kind of my go-to things when my emotions are kind of stirred in a way that I'm finding to be unhelpful or ineffective for living the kind of life that I want. The very first thing I came to and I do when I'm struggling in any kind of way emotionally is pause. It's the simplest thing, but oftentimes the one thing that we neglect to do. We neglect to actually introduce the concept of a pause, especially if you're in the middle of an emotional storm related to dealing with someone else, like a significant other. But a lot of times we just overlook this. We just keep going, not realizing that we're being hijacked by part of our brain that is feeling threatened. And really behind all hard emotions, this is a topic for another video, is one person feeling insecure. And so the moment we as humans feel a threat to our security, and this is usually not a conscious awareness, this is a subconscious feeling of threat, then we get up in our heads and we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, just as if a bear were charging out of the woods about to kind of rip a limb off. And so when we are worked up emotionally, this first thing we can do can be incredibly helpful, which is just to pause. Now, one way you can do that towards yourself or towards a partner who is coming at you maybe with a lot of intense emotion is to use the most powerful word in men's work and in life in these moments. I'm going to tell you this word and you're going to be amazed. The word is, huh. Now I'm going to say that again. The most powerful word to introduce the concept of pausing, whether you're talking to someone or just watching kind of your own insides, is to say, huh. Now, the word huh is really just an ability. It's a pause word. It's a word that gives us the kind of space and permission to be curious about what's going on. And it gives us just enough wiggle room sometimes. And it's also kind of a tactical reminder of, hey, like I can stop for a second and just kind of assess and watch that something is going on here that is feeling kind of intense. And so I like to just pause. Now, in that same pause, if I'm using a word like huh, which I'm more likely to do if I'm actually responding to someone who's intense, but on my own, then as soon as I pause, the next thing I do is breathe. Again, sounds kind of crazy maybe because we're always breathing, but we're not always intentionally breathing. And the moment we intentionally breathe, especially if we use an effective kind of breathing, we lower our heart rate, which lowers our blood pressure, which kind of regains our executive function from our midbrain or the amygdala where we're kind of worked up, and it allows us to just kind of settle down a little bit. I personally find for me that the best form of that breathing is about a 7-second inhale, 7-second exhale, 7-second inhale, 7-second exhale. And I do that usually for like 4 to 8 measures. If you have an Apple Watch or something that has a breathing app, you can just go ahead and use the breathing practice or exercise. I have mine set to 2 minutes, which is 8 breaths if I do that correctly. And it just seems to be really good for regaining my composure. Now, I know this is effective physiologically for me because I have other apps that check my heart rate variability, and I can see the change in my heart rate variability to be a positive change from something very low, which indicates stress, to something very high, which indicates the rest and digest cycle is going on. And so it's very clear to me with data that breathing really helps. And breathing is a tool that you carry with you all the time. You need nothing special. You just need to pause, number 1, and 2, breathe, number 2. Now, the next thing I try to do is just change my scenery. And again, sounds trivial, but these things are really effective. A lot of times, if you just walk 15 steps in a new direction, walk into a different room, you walk from indoors to outdoors, you walk from one part of your workplace to another. You get up and take a bio break. Really anything that changes the scenery seems to be enough to also kind of regain some of our executive function. Now, you don't have to do this for a protracted period of time, but really even seconds to a minute can be enough to just disrupt kind of whatever the thought pattern is that is causing us a lot of physiological intensity with our emotions. I personally find that it's the best for me if my scenery changes to something outdoors. I find that being outside to be tremendously restorative, whether it's extremely cold in the winter, even if it's a huge temperature change from cool to hot in the summer. There's something just fundamentally good about being outside. And when I'm really worked up, I have a hard time staying worked up if I'm in the outdoors. So that's my third thing: change of scenery, and if you can, do it to outside. The fourth thing I do, and all of this is happening in kind of the same general time span of a few minutes. That fourth thing I do is I reach for gratitude. Gratitude is, in my opinion, the Swiss Army knife of life when it comes to changing your internal landscape and your external circumstances. It's really, it's kind of the place that you can wedge your way past anxiety and fear and start to reframe the experience around other things that you can be grateful for. And if you don't know what to be grateful for and you're doing breathing, the easiest thing to do is to just express gratitude for your inhale, for your exhale, for really anything that comes to mind as being praiseworthy. You could express gratitude that you're alive, that you're on this, this ball of carbon spinning through time and space and orbiting the sun. You can express gratitude for the blessings in your life. You can express gratitude really for so many things. And when you do that, my experience is you're pulling yourself out of your head, out of the anxious mind, and kind of back into the centered, grounded place I would refer to as your heart, which is at rest. It's much more at peace. You're also telling your brain, I want you to look for positive things instead of disastrous, catastrophizing things, right? And so when we choose to express gratitude, which is a choice you can make anytime in the midst of suffering, in the midst of hardship, you can always choose gratitude. And when you do that and you kind of yank the brain out of anxiety through a little bit of an act of war against it, you start to kind of feel that in your body. Now, you might have to do that a dozen times in an hour, and that's okay, that's normal. But what you'll find is when you do that, you're showing your brain, hey, I'm okay. Because really why your brain is worked up in the first place is it's perceiving threat. And that threat, that feeling of threat, is not coming oftentimes from objective reality, but our subjective interpretation of our experience. And that is coming from a lifetime of interpretation and meaning that you learn, that I learn. You see, we learn when to be anxious and what to be anxious about. It's part of our development as humans. And these things were learned by us mostly without our consent or control as young humans. And yet we carry these patterns emotionally forward into life. And then we're sitting in front of an angry woman, for example, and we feel as threatened as we would by that charging bear. Not realizing a woman that's angry, 99 times out of 100 is not really a threat to us, but it feels like it. And then we start living in the feeling of our thinking, and then we have an emotional response. And so when we do these things, when we pause, when we experience some deeper breathing, when we change the scenery, and when we express gratitude, what we're doing is we're retraining the brain to experience things like an angry partner and woman in a different way than we learned them. And when you do continuous reps of something like this over weeks and weeks and weeks and months, your brain becomes retrained to a new way of experiencing things. This is essentially what cognitive behavioral therapy is, for example. It's cognitively kind of coaching or reminding yourself or teaching yourself that you're okay when your body doesn't feel like it's okay. It is a tremendous way to start overcoming anxiety in your life. You don't necessarily need professionals to help you with this. You can learn these tools yourself. And we see them to be very effective in our lives, in our community, and find men are routinely reporting a huge change in their interactions with other people, with when they feel fear and anxiety, and they're doing it through some of these ways. Now, the last thing, the fifth thing I would do when I'm experiencing this kind of intensity emotionally is some assessment, right? And I can't do any kind of assessment of what I'm feeling if I don't accept what I'm feeling. And so I didn't mention this in the 5 things, but it's an implicit part of how to address your emotions is to first accept that you're experiencing them. Now that might sound, again, kind of like, yeah, duh, right? But a tremendous amount of energy is given in life to us resisting what's happening. And really what that is our brain saying, man, I wish life were different right now. But the more you resist the present, the more emotional pain and frustration you have, because you're pining away for right now to be different than right now is. And so if you can consciously say, well, this is what's going on right now, then the next thing you can do is you can start working on changing that experience. And so rather than being frustrated at what is, you accept what is, and then you move into understanding your own power and agency to change your circumstances. And so in that place of acceptance of what is and seeing myself as having agency, what I reach for is this tool of assessment, which is, hey, is there another way to look at what's going on? Is there a better way to see these circumstances than I'm seeing them right now? And I would have some principles I apply to that, principles like unconditional high regard, ownership, self-reliance, and those things allow me to measure, is the thinking I'm experiencing right now really aligned with my value system? Can it really lead me anywhere healthy? Can it lead me to good things, or is it leading me to emotional pain? And is it even trustable? And I find if I can hang on to all these things, if I could do kind of some of these things, it changes my emotional landscape in that moment. And so I hope you have found these 5 things to be helpful for overcoming your emotional storms, your anxiety and fear, your sense of insecurity perhaps, or uncertainty. There are a few things that work for me. They're a little bit more complicated than I can express in this video here. And so if you'd like to know more about really how to master your inner life, how to be an emotionally resilient man, how to stand in intense emotions of yourself and other people without feeling like you lose your sense of groundedness, without losing your sense of okayness, I want you to scroll down, look in the description. You'll see a link where you can reach out and talk to myself or another mentor from our community. You'll also see links where you can find out more about our community. Inside of that community, for example, we have a course that's included called The Emotionally Resilient Man. That's where we teach men in great detail how to become more emotionally resilient. You can find out all that below. You could start your journey to becoming more emotionally resilient in that way. And so with that, I hope you have a great day. I hope you find meaningful and effective ways to stand in those storms, and I will talk to you in another video. Take care.